RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 6. A lot of bye weeks to break down, a lot of injuries, changing the rankings, and a lot more to get to here. So let's go ahead and start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, NFL Week 6. I'm your host, John McKechnie, and if you're joining us on the live stream, and you'll obviously hear this on the audio feeds as well, do not adjust. Mario did not get a haircut. That is, in fact, Joe Bartle filling in this week for Mario. I don't know if Mario is getting a haircut, and that's why he had to miss today's episode. He goes off to get sheared like a sheep in northern Wisconsin or something. But either way, the listeners are graced with a double dose of Joe this week.
Yeah, the hair on Mario, I think he would probably say the same thing too. It probably would take a few hours. Like that might be something you have to book off your whole day to make sure he gets cleaned up for that. No, but we love Mario here, of course. I'm trying to fill the shoes as best I can, but looking forward to being on the show with you, John.
Absolutely, man. It's been a minute. I think I remember back in 2016, we did some NFL pods. And we've worked together off and on these over the years, of course. But good to be back on with you in present day in the RotoWire YouTube era. Welcome in everyone that is joining us on the live stream. But as we do, we don't have a lot of time for fluff. Let's go ahead and dive right in. We got the Thursday nighter, we got the 49ers, we got the Seahawks, a little NFC West showdown. We've got the 49ers up to, at some books, 4, but most of them 3.5 point favorites on the road. Mm-hmm. I kind of think so too. I'm in on Seattle this week, but I'd like to get your thoughts from a fantasy perspective on what to expect here when it comes to the Seahawks and how they can attack this Niners defense.
Yeah, well, and I say a stupid number because there's been so many 3.5s this week in particular. A lot of those the books know what they're doing with it, but I think, and the way I read Vegas stuff, I'm a fan of John McKechnie's work, so I've listened to you and Nick do a lot of your shows on Friday as well, and you handle the betting aspect of things right. But I think Vegas knows you want to be in, you as the general public, the person that's watching this game, hopefully invested in Thursday, wants to be involved in the Niners and understands that they are still one of the Super Bowl favorites, which I think is a little bit interesting given their hierarchy. But there's been some real reservations for San Francisco's offense. Certainly the defense still seems vulnerable. The secondary, once again, I think is posing a significant issue. And you look at Seattle's offense as well. I mean, 3 receivers, that's one of the better 3 trio of targets in the league, at least if you're staying at receiver only. I think the Seahawks, it's not great analysis. The Seahawks kind of need to have this one, but they've lost 5 straight to San Francisco now, dating back to 3 years ago. And the Niners, after how disappointing they've played, also need this one too. The NFC West is really weird. And if you told me at the end of the year, the Seahawks will be 10-7, 9-8, and the Niners will be 1 game above that, I would say, yeah. I mean, that's why these games tend to be so important. So I'm anticipating you're going to see the Seahawks pass a ton. I saw Geno Smith's passing total was around 270 yards. I mean, that's a lot, but the Niners secondary is not very good, like I mentioned. So if it's DK Metcalf, it's Tyler Lockett. Probably Lockett in my mind is the one that benefits the most in this matchup, or JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's a lot of passing involved, and Kenneth Walker healthy again, that offense will be fine. I'm more interested to see if Brock Purdy and the Niners offense actually operates the way we thought they would entering the year. The vibes were really off in San Francisco. It's not good analysis to say vibes are bad, but Trent Williams, it's not signing a contract until a few days before. Same with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel getting injured midway through. You have your first round pick shot randomly. There are bad vibes. It's okay to say that. And going into Seattle, I mean, that's a really, really tough matchup. So I'm more nervous about Brock Purdy and company producing than I am Geno Smith.
And, to your point here, the Niners have been bad on the road so far this year, 2 losses on the road thus far. And this is a tough divisional game. Seattle's going to be up for this. And, I was doing some thinking on this one too, as it pertains to Purdy. And Purdy faced a Mike McDonald defense last year on Christmas against the Ravens. And he threw so many interceptions they had to pull him. The
right?
Seahawks
No, you're right.
So I wonder if McDonald kind of like has the skeleton key to confusing Purdy, and Purdy likes to tell defensive coordinators how much how well they've done to confuse him as he did walking off the field week 2 against the Vikings. So yeah, I'm nervous if I'm on the Niners in this spot. I think that, to your point, that the vibes do seem to be off. Things just aren't as easy. That nothing is coming as easy for this team this year. And I think going to Seattle in this spot, Seattle coming off the loss, I think in their own right, I think is going to be ready to rock here. So I do like the Seahawks.
Difference between the Ravens, which is one of the best teams over the past decade or so, and I can say that not just because my co-host is a Ravens fan, but I truly believe they are. They don't have the Super Bowl wins, but my team, the Packers, is also in that same echelon of talented teams that have not got the hardware to support what we've seen over the past decade. I don't think the Ravens defense, even in week 15 or whatever it was, is comparable to the Seahawks defense right now, both personnel wise, but also the injuries. I mean, Byron Murphy out again. We'll see if Boy Mafe is available or Derek Hall, both your outside linebackers listed as questionable. Reek Woolen, who has not really performed up to the level he had 2 years ago, but he not playing, I think, adds a factor. And then we'll see on Julian Love if he's available. I mean, that's a banged up defense. They were a banged up defense, 3 weeks ago against the Lions. And that was kind of the coming out party finally for Jared Goff and Ben Johnson in that offense. I that's what I'm more curious on is with all the injuries that Seattle is dealing with, can they withstand that and kind of not keep pace? Because I think the Seahawks offense actually going to set the pace, but can they throw just enough punches at Brock Purdy where, like you mentioned, if there'll be a confusing aspect turnover too, that's all it might take. I think a 1-score game, but it's gonna be like who has the ball last sort of game is what I feel like this could be.
So maybe, I mean, we got a pretty high total here, but
right.
I think we might end up seeing the over as well. And, to your point, you can scheme all you want, but if you don't have the talent to execute, then,
exactly.
It's all kind of moot. Let's move on over to the Sunday morning game in foggy London town. We've got Caleb Williams and the Bears going up against our guy Nick Whalen and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Whalen will not be in attendance for that one as far as I know. But we've got the Bears 1.5 point favorites. Nick threw a stat at me yesterday during the betting pod that rookies have not won in a London game. So that's, an interesting, wrinkle to consider here. What did you think of the Jaguars kind of getting off the mat last week? And do you buy any of it, with them going into this game?
I thought it was kind of a lucky performance. I'm sure they were planning for Joe Flacco. I mean, if I was Jacksonville and I was scouting that with how bad Richardson's played, if I could do anything from a coaching staff perspective to prevent Anthony Richardson from being out there without harming the reputation he has or confidence he has, that's a win if I'm the coaching staff for the Colts. So I was not surprised at all that you had Joe Flacco as your starting quarterback. I mean, Tank Bigsby had to rip off a 50-yard screen pass to sort of put them in position. There was some missed field goal shenanery or whatever you want to call it, some fourth quarter stuff where they played the way I thought they would, but I have thought Jacksonville would play much better for most of the season, and they have not. And the record shows how poorly they played. I think, and you and Mario cover this every Thursday. Doug Peterson's a sham right now at this point, and the reports of Bill Belichick being the phantom or puppet head coach into like December feel more and more real to me. Like I think that will be happening at some point in the near future, and Chad Kahn will kind of make that decision for Doug Peterson. But until that officially happens, the most interesting thing for me in Jacksonville is if they were to lose this one, we'll get to that in a second. What happens with Travis Etienne? Because you're sitting at 1-5, entering the fourth year of that effectively a fifth-year deal, I think, from a rookie. But there's a number of teams that need a rookie running back. You have the trade deadline. A new coaching staff might not want to invest $10 million or whatever it is plus into that running back position. I think Etienne could go. I think he get traded, and it's something I'd be thinking about if I was rostering Etienne, but also Tank Bigsby, who I don't know about you, I've had to answer a lot of questions. What I do waiver wire wise, do I pick him up? What's the investment? I know what this general room, the Thursday show, thinks of Tank Bigsby, and I always call myself a disciple of John McKechnie and Mario Puig. So by default, I'm thinking Tank Bigsby is not all that good. But if he is the lone starter or he's splitting time with whatever third string running back there might be, there's some avenue where the fantasy goodness from Tank Bigsby is interesting to me. And we might get some clarification if Etienne does not play come Thursday, I guess Sunday morning. The other part of this, and this is a little bit from the gambling angle, but fantasy too. So Jacksonville, I presume, has left where they've known this cadence of London games more than anyone else in the NFL. It's effectively their home away from home. They're not dealing with any of the Florida weather things. And I don't know if the situation that's going to be happening in Florida and currently happening will impact them on the football field, but that would weigh on my mind as a person who cares about things and people a little bit, and that they're going to be there next week too, right? They're having a 2-week stay in London. I just think Jacksonville's poised to be a better team. They've been in the situation before and might be a bit more motivated. Whether Caleb Williams is a rookie or not, I mean, the Vikings went into London last week and they didn't look nearly the world beaters that we anticipated they'd be. Thankfully, they ran into Aaron Rodgers, who is far, far, far away from what the Jets thought they'd be, and you get the win. But that's my thought process in this. Well, wait, Jacksonville knows what they're doing. They have enough talent, and they have maybe not a coaching advantage, but is there any difference between Matt Eberflus and Doug Peterson? It's marginal in my mind, if that's the case. So I like Jacksonville this week.
Yeah, I think it all makes sense. I think from the fantasy angle, I think the most interesting angle is definitely the Jacksonville backfield. We actually on our value meter this week, we've taken the plunge as a company. We've valued Tank Bigsby higher than Travis Etienne.
Oh no,
who's ranked? I know who's ranked outside of the top 24 running backs on this particular slate. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I still think that Etienne has all the talent in the world, but things just don't really seem to be working out for him in Jacksonville. We're not getting what we had hoped when he was a first round pick a couple years back. So, I think Bigsby will kind of end up proving to be somewhat of fool's gold, but if he's getting the work, eventually you kind of have to just hold your nose and accept that the production is production, no matter how pretty or unpretty it is. As far as Williams is concerned, Caleb Williams on the other side, going up against this Jacksonville secondary that, has been carved up pretty routinely this year. Is he fringe start worthy for you this week?
So 4 teams on bye. I think the most notable from that would have been Patrick Mahomes. And frankly, you're likely happy to have a reprieve from figuring out if Mahomes is a starting caliber fantasy quarterback, which it's crazy to say in week 6, but there we are with Kansas City's offense. So the Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfields, Sam Darnold, another one on bye. I mean, like those guys, you are already confidently starting, I think, over Caleb Williams week to week. Certainly, if you didn't start Kirk Cousins last Thursday, you are now ruining the day that you did not, because rest of season, in my mind, he is among the top 10 quarterback out there. So it becomes difficult. Are we replacing Jordan Love for Caleb Williams? No, I think you keep Jordan Love in there so long as he's healthy. It's a really tricky stage for Caleb Williams, but he did what he was supposed to do against the Panthers defense last week. That's encouraging because I think Caleb Williams is really talented. Again, I've heard you guys talk ad nauseum about him. I had not lost faith whatsoever, but at some point you want to see it. You wanted to see that USC Caleb Williams effectively play out on there. Now, I don't know if I wanted the copy, cut, and paste version where he's dancing around NFL defensive linemen like it is college. That speaks to how bad the Panthers' defense talent is, that he was able to maneuver around in the pocket in such a way that he embarrassed them, because I don't think he does that against 30 other NFL franchises. In the same breath, it's Doug Peterson's Jacksonville Jaguars. Are they actually among the NFL's 30 franchises that you're concerned with? So I'm not playing Caleb Williams if I have better options, and I think you might. Like, for example, we do the waiver wire show on Tuesday. Geno Smith was 32% rostered in Yahoo leagues. I'll play Geno Smith over the Niners against the Niners every single time. But I would consider, and real quick, Trevor Lawrence, I think I might be looking at a little bit too. Colin Brisker, really good safety for the Bears, is already ruled out. Hurts my stake league team. I was caught off guard on that one. But Jaquan Brisker not playing might make a difference and make it a little bit easier for Jacksonville to pass the ball.
Okay, so it might see a little more Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas involvement this week's, but either way, this is a very interesting London game by London game standards. I think there's a lot of unknowns here that are going to get sorted out. Before we get on over to the rest of the Sunday slate, we've got a message from our friends over at Underdog. We're proud to partner with Underdog Fantasy for the NFL season. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and it's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. In addition to their popular best ball contest, Underdog also offers great DFS pick'em games. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for your chance to win big. You can win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night by picking between 2 and 8 players to build a pick'em entry. This week, taking a look-see at the RotoWire picks and props tool to kind of guide my hand here a little bit. I do like Jaden Daniels higher than his posted yardage. I think it's relatively low. It's 230.5. I like the higher for Jaden Daniels in this one. Going back to that London game, I like Brian Thomas to go higher than 55.5 receiving yards. And I like Rashad Bateman in what's going to be a high scoring game in that Baltimore-Washington game to go higher than 30.5 yards. Got 8 targets last week. I believe that was a season high. I think we're going to see that continue, especially if this one ends up being pretty back and forth. Sign up with RWNFL to claim your free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or visit them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with my promo code RWNFL to claim your free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Got to be 18 or older, 21 or older if you're in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 or older if you're in Alabama or Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog operates. Terms apply. Are you concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. If you're in Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text NEXT STEP to 53342. If you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line. That's 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. Okay, that was a mouthful. We're onward.
You did great. You did great.
Thank you. You do the reads too. You know
Yes,
how it is.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Hey, did you want to get to Rob's question real quick here? Yeah, perfect.
We do. We got a little super chat here. So thank you, Rob, and good luck to your Detroit Red Wings as per your AVI. Right there, hockey season just got underway. You can check out our RotoWire tools for NHL. But we got to pick 2 here, Joe. Let's do this. Stephon Diggs, Garrett Wilson, or Deontay Johnson. So who you benching from that?
I don't know how much you do these sorts of answers, but the way I have to answer it effectively is let's narrow it down. Like, who am I guaranteed starting? And especially in full point PPR, I think I'm guaranteed starting Stephon Diggs with Nico Collins on injured reserve. We'll talk about the Texans matchup and how I envision that to go. And I think it's different than conventional assumption seems to be. And maybe they're right. The people are with that with Tank Dell specifically. But for me, I want to have Stephon Diggs in there. And then even against the Patriots, that's the right call in my mind. I think the Jets are going to win against the Bills. There's a little bit of dead cat bounce theory. And just kind of like the Bryce Young switch with Andy Dalton. Like, you don't do that unless you're going to completely lose the team. You don't fire Robert Saleh unless you've lost it. Maybe Aaron Rodgers has helped accelerate the losing of it, but you've lost it. That being said, I think you got to play Deontay Johnson as well, too. So Garrett Wilson, even though I think the Jets win, is the person I'm taking out of this. And he had a monster game last week. I understand. Maybe they've unlocked something. Maybe I'll be foolish for saying so, but Deontay Johnson's far safer of a floor for me. And I kind of want to go that direction.
Yeah, and the Panthers are at home. The Falcons, they had the long layoff. They got thrown all over the last time that we saw them. So Deontay Johnson definitely makes sense. It's a worthwhile question. I think that each of these guys are in a vacuum, worth starting. I would probably still, stick with Garrett Wilson alongside Stephon Diggs here, but I definitely understand the rationale when it comes to Deontay. And the Jets are going to be really tough to kind of figure out, especially right after the kind of crazy week that they've had. But let's go over to the big crab cake. We got the Ravens. We've got the Commanders. Ravens 6.5-point favorites in this one. 51.5 is the total, which I believe is the highest on the board this week. So a lot of offense, not a lot of defense is kind of the lean here. So, I think for me, as far as, bye week considerations plus injuries, I just alluded to Rashad Bateman, but I do kind of think that it's not wheels up for him necessarily. That is a bit too far afield, but Bateman is getting more involved, and I think that this is a game where the Ravens are going to have to continue to stick with the pass. I think Washington probably could take a page out of the Cincinnati playbook from a week ago, stack the box, and kind of slow down the Ravens' run game and make Lamar Jackson throw. Although that worked to the Cincinnati's detriment last week with the way that Lamar Jackson was playing. But the Ravens generally have not been great at home as big favorites. So I think Washington hangs around in this one and actually gives them a real challenge, potentially even upsets the Ravens. But either way, I think as far as like your kind of fringe guys that weren't really on your radar earlier this season for fantasy, might have been dropped in some leagues. I think Bateman is kind of like the sneaky one for me, at least on Baltimore's side.
Yeah. So let's do the Rashad Bateman part of this first. I drafted him everywhere, and I made the statement at the beginning of the season on one of the platforms I was on, just too many at this point. And I think it was true then, and I think it's true now. The players that you were drafting in August, end of August, maybe even late July, were correct. There wasn't going to be any like big waiver wire winner week one that you're carrying on throughout the year. The Kyron Williams of the world, like that kind of stuff. I didn't think there were those players like who us in the industry had identified as fantasy relevant among the top 250 were more or less going to be there. Now, Bateman was one of the last 3 or 4 round picks. You could shuttle him in and out of your lineup for the Trey Tuckers of the world now, or Jacob Whittingtons, the Rams are on bye, for example, stuff like that. But Bateman is still rosterable, and in certain matchups, he could be played. I think this one is a perfect example for that. That being said, you are saying the Ravens could lose this game because you are a Ravens fan protecting your emotions. I'm a Packer fan. I'm well aware of trying to protect myself. All of Wisconsin sports has ruined me for life, that I can't trust anything or be happy. So I know what you're doing. But this is Cliff Kingsbury running an offense in the NFL level against one, and I said this earlier, but still one of the best teams of the past decade in the Ravens. I'm not trusting Cliff Kingsbury to dice and slice the Baltimore Ravens. He can do that against the Panthers or the Giants or any of those types of teams, whatever this Bengals defense is right now. But I'd be very shocked if Jaden Daniels looks like a top 3 overall quarterback, not fantasy, overall quarterback against the Baltimore Ravens. I might be wrong. You might be the correct thought process, again, protecting your emotions, feelings, things like that. I get it. But I think the spread is like one of those rat lines a little bit, because you're like, wait, the Ravens haven't played that good and the Commanders played really good. There's a reason that number is set the way it is. And I think it's lack of respect for Cliff Kingsbury and also an enormous amount of respect for the Ravens. So Rashad Bateman might be a good play. There's a lot of offense, you would assume. But if the Ravens race out to a 3-score lead, you're just sitting on the ball and Rashad Bateman doesn't get involved. And the Commanders can't use Diami Brown to change the landscape. And if you're the Ravens, you're just putting 2 safeties over Terry McLaurin. You are not hitting that go shot. And it sounds simple. I think it is simple, John. And I think the Ravens are actually going to be pretty convincingly winners in this one.
All right. Well, I like to hear that. I have my reservations after the way that the secondary has been playing pretty much all season. So I think if Washington is testing the secondary enough, I think they're going to connect eventually. But, it could be in garbage time, a la the Cowboys game. But I don't know. It can color me nervous for this one.
You're
on
allowed
the
to be.
Ravens
That's
side.
fine.
Joe Burrow could not be stopped last week. I know Jaden Daniels is not Joe Burrow, at least not yet. But, for as much bagging on
Jamar
Cliff
Chase
Kingsbury
couldn't be stopped. T. Higgins couldn't be stopped. Terry McLaurin can't do that. That's not the only difference on how these offenses are going to look in my mind.
Well, if Marcus Williams is your answer for over the top, then I think Terry McLaurin will be just fine. Williams has been not
Send
good.
him back to New Orleans. It's fine.
Honestly, yeah. Can they pick up the rest of the contract too? All right, so I'm gonna serve it back to you on the home cook, and we've got the Packers and the Cardinals. You nervous?
So we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of matchups. I think this is actually a really good slate. I don't know about like overall week 6. I'm looking forward to a lot of these football games. There's a few, thankfully, later on in the show that I don't care to talk about, or I don't think have much fantasy value. So Packers, Cardinals. Am I nervous? Packers favored by 5. This is in Lambeau. The Cardinals have been really good when the expectations are zilch against them, right? They beat the Niners last week and they were 7.5-point underdogs. I'm a little bit nervous just because I've watched my Packers. I think Trey McBride's going to do really well. I think Michael Wilson and Marvin. I do think this is a get-right game for Marvin Harrison, even if Jair Alexander does not play. He's missed the past 2 weeks, but he was practicing earlier this week. We'll have to see if Jair's out there. I think Marvin Harrison is one of those big bodies that can win the football over Jair. Same with Eric Stokes, and the same goes for Michael Wilson. You think about a couple weeks ago, the Packers dominated the Titans, but DeAndre Hopkins had his only good week when he was able to body the ball away from Eric Stokes for it felt like 3 quarters, and then the Packers finally made an adjustment. I think Michael Wilson can do the same thing. So those 3 receivers, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, I all think will do really well. I'm really curious if we see Josh Jacobs kind of build on what I was anticipating earlier this season to be a really good game against the Rams. Finally scored a touchdown. There weren't as many holding calls called against the Packers. They are one of the highest penalized teams along the offensive line. Thanks, Rasheed Walker, the left tackle. We know as football fans that watch this intelligently, there's holding every play. It's if the refs choose to call or not. And Jacobs, I think, has been a little bit unlucky with how often the big plays or big long runs have been called back on. I think you're going to see the Packers offense and Josh Jacobs look really good. It's a matter of, does the Packers offense choose to focus on Romeo Doubs and make that situation kind of go away a little bit? Like if Doubs got 6 for 70 against the Cardinals and the Packers win, will the questions about what happened with this weird suspension thing go away a bit more or be a little less out there? I think the answer is yes. And this might be a good time to sort of do that if you are the Packers offense.
So in that instance, how does the reintroduction of Doubs affect this offense? If you have Doubs on your team, probably deeper leagues is where we'd be looking. Is he someone that you could feel okay about starting? Would you move anyone, back to the bench as a result? Or are you going to kind of play the wait and see game with Doubs this week?
Well, I play in 16 leagues. So when I'm thinking about deeper formats, I'm going like, all right, would I play Wan'Dale Robinson over Romeo Doubs? No, I'm playing Wan'Dale Robinson. Would I play Trey Tucker for the Raiders, especially if Devontae Adams does not play like assumed? I'm playing Doubs over Trey Tucker. But like that's the kind of list of receivers. And you had mentioned Rashad Bateman. I think I would play Doubs over Bateman because I have just a fundamentally different assumption as to how that game is going to look than you might, which is okay. Doubs is a really good receiver too. He's a great third down guy. I think Love has a lot of trust in him, and they use him in the red zone. He's not going to be a number one paid receiver. It seemed out of character for Doubs to care that he was not the number one guy, which was possibly why he was suspended and skipped practice the past 2 weeks or past 2 days last week. I don't know. I kind of wonder if we're ever going to know that story or if that might get buried in the doors in Lambeau. But I think Doubs is one of those guys I'd definitely consider for wide receiver 3 flex because they want to get away from that story and prove that he's a factor against this Cardinals defense, which is miserable. Like they're going to be able to move the ball no matter what, whether it be Jacobs or anybody else. I think Doubs gets a bit more work than we've seen in past weeks.
Okay. The Packers receiving core is just kind of like a black box to me. Like other than Jaden Reed, they're all kind of indistinguishable. Like I like them all. I liked them all in college, and I can never guess the right week for any of those guys. But Doubs being back in the mix only really makes me more confused. Let's get on over Patriots Texans. The Drake May experience begins Sunday, but I want to hit the Texans fantasy angle first. Obviously, Nico Collins goes to injured reserve.
Yep.
Tough scene. But if you were invested in Tank Dell coming into the season, obviously, as of October 10th, you're not happy. Is this a spot where, we start to see that, your investments start to pay off? Or do you think that, there's some risk here that, the target funnel goes a little bit heavier towards Diggs and other guys get involved and all of a sudden, Tank Dell, that expected boom in Collins' absence doesn't necessarily happen?
I'd love to think that. I want to think that Tank Dell is going to be more of a factor. And I want to be honest to the audience. I didn't think Tank Dell would do nearly as well as he did last year. The 165-pound receiver who looks like a twig on the football field makes me really nervous if you're getting force-fed the ball 8 times a game. I didn't think that would make a difference. And he was electric. Of course, he did get injured towards the end, but Tank Dell was a really important factor. I think the Texans, when they made the trade for Stephon Diggs, kind of recognized, well, we have a Super Bowl window open right now. And if we could protect ourselves from any sort of injury, but certainly to Tank Dell, that will be better for our organization, even if it means adding Stephon Diggs and whatever headaches, perceived or otherwise, were out there. I like Ben Sloak a lot as the offensive coordinator, along with Ben Johnson. I think those two are very obvious head coach candidates in the very near future. You would assume a really good offensive coordinator would say, hey, okay, Nico Collins is gone. That opportunity for a deep post beater, we can't rely on as much anymore. I'm going to scheme things more for a really good receiver that I have in Tank Dell. My concern is they're going to just operate the same way and just plug and play Xavier Hutchinson in that Nico Collins role. I mean, Xavier Hutchinson has the body type to be Nico Collins. Nico Collins wasn't Nico Collins outside of this show to anybody else until last year and then became a thing. So I don't know if it's really that much of a, is Tank Dell going to be more involved, or are they just going to operate status quo and have Xavier Hutchinson do Nico Collins things? Will he be as effective? I don't think so. But no one would have really guessed Nico Collins would look as good as he did, again, other than you two on the show throughout all of last year. So I'm assuming it's Xavier Hutchinson getting 7 or 8 targets. He's one of my hot waiver wire pickups right now. That we know Nico Collins is out for the next 4 weeks. Jalen Tolbert probably is more fantasy relevant given the passing attack for the Cowboys. But the Texans have been winning football games with Nico Collins as the main guy, then Stephon Diggs, and then Tank Dell as an afterthought. I think the Texans are going to keep trying to win games with that same hierarchy, with Diggs pushed up higher first.
Yeah, and Hutch, kind of like from a physical traits perspective, like you would send him to the same areas of the field as you would Collins. He's not quite the same explosive athlete, but the numbers in college were pretty crazy from Hutchinson. I'm a little bit surprised that it's taken him this long to kind of get onto the radar, but I'm not surprised that he's there. Circumstances obviously not ideal for how it's happened, but I think that he's absolutely to your point about scooping him up on waivers this week. He's someone that I had some claims in this week as well. I think we can both kind of assume that this isn't going to be a great day for Drake May, but at the same time, do you think longer term this is going to work out as far as like boosting up guys like Hunter Henry, Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, that type of thing as the season progresses here in New England?
So I'm really happy we can do this answer with you, because I've answered the Drake May question a lot, and my answer is going to remain the same until said otherwise. Nobody except one person who I share the screen with right now expected CJ Stroud to look like what CJ Stroud did last year. And especially with all the injuries along the offensive line. I know Laramie Tunsil played 3 of the months, 4 months, whatever, but like I wrote the notes on Saturday. I was writing 4 or 5 Texan injury update notes on the offensive line every single week. Like, I'm aware that they were dealing with a lot of stuff. Nobody would have expected the Commanders' offense to look as good as they have with the offensive line that the Commanders have. So that the idea is, well, the Patriots' offensive line is horrible, therefore no quarterback can be successful. Oh, and they don't have any weapons. Nobody thought the Texans had weapons last year either. I'm pushing back on that narrative. Like, people can be right, but it just seems to be an assumed thing that Drake May will suck because the Patriots offensive line is not very good and they have no weapons. And I'm like, no, John told me all of last year, CJ Stroud would be good. And he was, and the Texans offensive line was not good. So I think Drake May's mobility, and he is a mobile quarterback. I mean, I was drafting him at the end of best ball leagues for this exact time period because I know he can run around and do stuff, will help. We know as NFL people who watch the game that a mobile quarterback is significantly more helpful in these exact scenarios. Could Drake May still get injured? Yes. Will they pass the ball effectively? The scheme sure doesn't look like it will. But again, I didn't think it would last year for the Texans. Pop Douglas is by far one of my favorite pickups. I think he will be a PPR maven in the same way that Wan'Dale Robinson has been for the Giants. If you're in deeper leagues and you follow all the reports for Drake May during the preseason, there are days he looked really bad. There were days Colin Cowherd wanted to point to Joe Milton as somebody that would matter, or whatever it is, the Tennessee guy. Cowherd looked stupid then, looks stupid now. But it was when Pop Douglas was not playing. And when Pop Douglas is playing, Drake May has looked good. So I like Pop Douglas a lot among this group.
Yeah, I'm borderline interested in maybe throwing Douglas into a DFS lineup or two. But I think overall, like, we reached that point. And I know that there's fair criticism of saying we're not starting Drake May, and then things go as bad as they possibly could have, and then say, actually, now we're going to throw him in. So I understand the criticism of Mayo there, but hopefully Drake May can kind of make him look smart. I definitely agree to the point where May's athleticism, I think, is maybe understated. I don't know if people are quite aware of how good of a runner he was in college, and I think that Brissett just so limited as far as like the passing and the aggressiveness. Right. I think that, May is going to kind of open up different parts of the field for this New England offense. And it's a skill group that not a lot of household names, but I think that they are talented all within their own right. I do like Polk. I think he's looked better than I expected. And Douglas is definitely someone that I have my eye on as well. So expecting a somewhat of a rough debut here, but I think longer term, this is a Patriots offense that gets watchable under the tutelage of one Drake May. Before we get on over to our next game, we got a message from our friends over at Vivid Seats. NFL football is back. Gear up for the gridiron with Vivid Seats and score tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every touchdown, every tackle, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team, live and in person. And with Vivid Seats, You earn perks with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets and simply cash in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, ROTOWIRE. From the upper deck to the front row, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. We also got a message from our friends at Circa. It's football season, and the best place to catch the games is at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Can confirm. Featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. It's pretty big. Whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. No matter the size of your group, Stadium Swim is the place for you. From owner suites to cabanas, day beds to stadium booths, there are seating choices for everyone. And the best part, Stadium Swim is open 365 days a year. With the temperature-controlled pools, it's a great place to catch the games all season long. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Book today at circalasvegas.com. All right, we got a handful of games to get to here. We've got the Bucks and the Saints. Rattler time. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of the games I don't really care to spend time on. Not that I'm doing the it's whatever, but like Rattler time is my frustration, or Jake Haener time. It doesn't really matter. The Saints offense always felt there's a lot of different proverbs we could use, but I'll be polite in saying it felt like a charade, or it felt like mirage in the instance that, wow, they
not
can't
a nice charade.
Yeah, there's I had too many different words in my mind in that one. But it felt like a mirage in the sense that you're not scoring 40 points a game. The Cowboys defense probably isn't that good. The Panthers aren't a real NFL team. And then lo and behold, they come back down to earth. Like, they weren't doing anything crazy unique. It wasn't like Mike McDaniel creating this Dolphins offense with 100 speed Madden players all jetting around the field. It was like, well, what if we ran a few more screens to Alvin Kamara and then took a deep shot to our really fast receivers? Oh, wow. Now our offense is great. Like, it doesn't work that way in the NFL. So I'm pretty convinced this is going to be bad. I would be benching Rashid Shaheed everywhere, although I think most people are probably gotten it wrong every week in which one you want to play him. And I'm really worried if somebody has a lot of Chris Olave that this is not going to look good. And I think Derek Carr is out for like, they might not put him on the IR just to make the team feel better, but we're saying a multi-week absence. That was already reported pretty early Tuesday morning. Whenever that happens, and it was the case for Nico, that just assumes to me it's going to be the longer side of whatever this is. So I'm nervous about the Saints. Maybe the under hits because the Saints defense is really good and they play reinvigorated, but is this that much different than Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley playing at quarterback? I don't think so.
Rattler's interesting to me. I mean, he was such a hot shot as a recruit. Didn't work out for him at Oklahoma. Goes to South Carolina. His first year at South Carolina is great. Second year, not so much. That's why he got drafted where he did. But I think you're locking in disaster if you're starting Jake Haener. Whereas with Rattler, there's at least the chance of some semblance of upside. I think that there's going to be some turnovers. I would be taking a look for any sort of interception props out there on Rattler because he's very, very confident in his arm. And I think in his first NFL start, that could ultimately work against him.
You can admit that you liked his Netflix debut. That's really what this is, John, is you're a Spencer Rattler Netflix fan. It's okay.
Oddly enough, I've only know about that through osmosis. I know about his sort of abrasive
good job.
personality from that. But watching him in college, just a guy who has maybe undeserved confidence in himself. But man, I mean, he can throw it. I mean, the tools are there. But I just, I think we're going to see some rough debuts from the quarterbacks this week, and Rattler no different. So I think Todd Bowles and company are going to scheme this one up. The Saints' best chance is if they can get Marshawn Lattimore to make Mike Evans mad enough to get thrown out of the game early. Maybe this stays close, but
really good win condition. Got to get a guy kicked out of the game. That's how we are going to win. Okay, good job, Saints.
Well, the Saints have gotten up to hijinks before. Onward, we got the Browns and we got the Eagles. Line's at 9.5 now.
Yeah.
It was 8.5 yesterday. How high is too high?
That's why I literally wrote in the article that I posted yesterday. There might not be a high enough number for this that I'm going to take the Eagles. And I could be wrong. I mean, like the Browns could cover if it was 37.5. It's possible if the Eagles are favored somehow by 28 points. Like maybe that is a situation I don't want to deal with at all. Like there is zero piece of the Browns offense that I want to talk about, that I want to care about. I want to put them away until whatever happens with Deshaun Watson or Kevin Stefanski or Jimmy Haslam, who, by the way, now owns the Bucs. So I get to have that in my life even more. Yippee. I want nothing to do with it. I've had to talk about Nick Chubb a lot. Like, I love Nick Chubb. I'm not the Nick Chubb fan guy. That is you and Mario, and I will let you guys have that spot for your entire lives. But I love Nick Chubb. I don't care if he comes back. I don't care if Jerome Ford is a split time. Don't talk to me about the Browns. Not you, John, but just anybody. Nobody should be discussing this. Well, what is Jerry Jeudy's fantasy value? I don't care. Don't be in the business of worrying about the Browns offense. So to me, is AJ Brown going to look good? I assume he will. Will Devonta Smith come back after that nasty concussion? I assume he will. Will Jalen Hurts be a quarterback that you were confidently drafting the first 5 rounds? I hope so. I mean, these are rest of season concerns. The Eagles should win. They should win handily. And we're not going to have this Browns problem resolved until probably 2 months too late. And I don't even know if that's the correct answer. So I want nothing to do with anything related to Cleveland fantasy football.
You know who seems to be not concerned with the business of the Cleveland Browns is Deshaun Watson, and he doesn't seem concerned about really
That's a great line.
any of it. I will say from we threw out some underdog pick'ems. We got 35.5 receiving yards for Dallas Goedert. I do think I like the higher for that, even with AJ Brown coming back, and AJ Brown, whatever you find his anytime touchdown at this week, I think that he goes ahead and gets right back into the end zone. But yeah, the Browns are dead as a doornail, basically. And I think, going into last week's game against Washington, it's like, oh, is this the hold your nose and take the Browns spot? Like they showed that it wasn't. You can continue to hold your nose, but do so and don't watch them. All right. Indianapolis versus Tennessee. We've got the Titans as 2.5 point favorites. Concerning looking injury report for Indianapolis. I don't know if that crossed your radar earlier Thursday.
Yeah, so everyone's hurt and we have no idea if they're playing, right? Like it's whose lines anyway. Points are made up, they don't matter. It's the Colts injury report at this point on Thursday. So Jonathan Taylor, I think, still not practicing. Now Trey Sermon still not practicing. Richardson looks good. Is that a win for the Colts? I'm not sure. And then Josh Downs also not practicing. Did I miss anybody? I could have missed a lot of people, it feels like, at this point.
Pittman.
Oh yeah. Well,
did you say Pittman?
Pittman was going to be out on injured reserve. That was earlier today. That's already like a gone and out of my memory news story at this point.
Got it.
I really want to care. This is horrible. I really want to care about the Colts and Titans. I think the Titans made a lot of moves, which if I'm doing this on Madden, that's the right idea. Like I got a cheap Will Levis. Is he my guy? Let's go ahead and throw money at L'Jarius Sneed. We'll sign Jeffrey Simmons to a big deal. We'll get in Calvin Ridley. Like I want to see if Will Levis is it. You and I could have said that he wasn't it last year. I don't think they need to throw all this money in there. We could have said Will Levis wasn't it when he put mayo in his coffee. That seemed like a pretty darn big red flag to me. So I'm not interested in the Titans. That Tony Pollard is getting a lot of work, I guess, is good. But even that feels like it could just change at any moment. And from the Colts side of things, it's just not how I built a team. Getting a bunch of money on my interior defensive line and then bringing back all my players that helped me get to a sub 500 record is not the way I would think will improve my Indianapolis Colts. And yet they've kind of done that 3 years running. So I'm concerned. I would be much more interested in the offense if Joe Flacco was playing, but it sounds like we're getting more positive news about Anthony Richardson. I like Shane Steichen a lot. I'm concerned because I think Shane Steichen's really good. That Richardson has not produced. It might be Richardson and not Steichen, but it's a tough spot to be if you're investing in the Colts offense. If Michael Pittman is out. If Josh Downs is also out, by default, Alec Pierce probably needs to be a bit more involved. He can't just be the AFC Rashid Shaheed. Like he has to probably be a bit more than that. And I think that's interesting to me to a certain point. But if it's Richardson throwing those balls, well, it's 9 completed passes. Like what's that going to do?
Well, it sometimes for Pierce, like 3 gets you more than enough, especially with Richardson with the deep shots. So I do think with all those injuries elsewhere in the receiver room, that Pierce is, close to, confident starting range. But yeah, the rest of this offense, you're just not so sure about. The Titans coming off the bye. We don't know if their coaching staff has earned like their respect of like, oh, they've had extra time to prepare. I'm just
right.
I'm going to avoid this game with extreme prejudice, I think, for the most part, and hope that I don't have a ton of fantasy exposure to it. Let's get to the afternoon. We got the Chargers and the Broncos. Chargers 2.5-point favorites. They are also coming off the bye. The Broncos have been shocking teams over the last few weeks. I mean, the defense, I think, looks legit. How much are you trusting like this development of Bo Nix, and like, is it going to be linear, or does he, kind of hit rough patch this week?
It's funny. I was looking at the games, knowing that we talk about obviously every one of them. I'm thinking, what is worthwhile to say about Broncos Chargers? I don't know why the Chargers are favored by 3, especially this being in Denver. That was one of those I was like, what is it doing to a weird extent? Yeah, Bo Nix is the interesting part of this, and I was not high on him. I also, and full disclosure to the audience, I really despise Sean Payton. It's not just the bad Netflix movie with Kevin James, but also I really just don't like the attitude in which he seems like he's smarter than everyone, when in reality he does a lot of really dumb stuff and has done dumb stuff for effectively 2 years now. That doesn't get to make you smart, because you just get to say dumb stuff in a smart way. That's a personality type thing that I always clash with. And Sean Payton seems to be oozing that out of him. So I'm happy that the Broncos are winning football games, and I'm happy that a young quarterback is helping. But is this any different than Mac Jones at the Patriots in his rookie year? And we all watched Mac Jones play out. In fact, it's different because Mac Jones produced. He had passing yards. He looked kind of competent. I don't think Bo Nix has shared many of those, or at least not consistently. I think the Broncos win, and possibly handedly, because the Chargers are even more self-limited, because they're really stupid playing the game of football. But I don't really think it's because of Bo Nix or the Broncos offense. And I would sooner rather see both these teams just completely jettisoned, relegated to college football, and then kind of come back with more important things than whatever they're doing this year.
I'm a big Harbaugh guy.
I'm sorry.
Going in, it got me thinking about Kevin James and the great film The Zookeeper, where he's hanging out with a gorilla in a TGI Fridays. All right, we're off the rails. Steelers Raiders.
Oh, gee, another wonderful game. Thanks, John. I can't wait to talk about this. No, the
Aidan
O'Connell era. How can we not be excited for that, right? The Aidan O'Connell era. Here we go.
Well, can we?
You're right. So the one area in which I've disagreed with Mario, and I have not been able to say it enough on the SiriusXM show that we share, because there's less things, there's more important things to argue about than Antonio Pierce's head coaching credibility. But I don't think he's very good. And frankly, the middle linebacker for the Giants team that was miracle carried by Eli Manning to multiple Super Bowl wins isn't the selling point of stud head coach that I think Antonio Pierce thinks he has. To me, I think the Giants offense, I think the Vegas offense build around Zamir White running 22 times a game was not a functioning thing. And because you beat the Chiefs on Christmas doesn't make it even more functioning as a result. So entering this year, I was already low on the Raiders as is. Aidan O'Connell is not better than Gardner Minshew. That the Raiders are choosing to switch that does not mean it just spells to me that they're desperate. I thought the Devontae Adams spiraling has proven that the Raiders are desperate and they're not doing the right things. It's like my house is on fire, but I'm going to put up a picture of favorite rock band artist X, because it makes that one side of the wall look better. I mean, it does. Sure. Your house is still on fire. Like, does it really matter what you're doing? That's the Aidan O'Connell experience to my mind. Brock Bowers is great. You couldn't have been more right about that call. And he's one of the 3 tight ends I want to roster rest of the season. The only issue is you have to pick 9 if you're in a 12-team league that you have to be like fine with. Yeah, Bowers is fine. Max Crosby will probably do really well. The Steelers actually allow the most fantasy points to defensive ends. That might have been a stake league thing I was looking at earlier today. Their offensive tackle has been really bad. It's going to be a gross game. I mean, that's what Steelers football is. That's what Raiders football, I guess, chose to be entering this year. And I want no part of it.
Yeah, no, it's, there's the obvious guys that you can start from this one. And then, everyone else can pretty much be left aside, let's go to the NFC South. We got the Falcons and the Panthers. Falcons 6-point favorites in this one on the road. Falcons, obviously looked impressive last time out. Really exciting Thursday night game. Can they continue that with the long layoff going into, kind of sleepy Carolina?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, sleepy Carolina or just the slightly better version of AAA college football Carolina, because that's where they're at this point. I'm of the opinion that the Panthers are just going to be one of the worst teams in football. I think they're trying. The Deontay Johnson trade was a good deal. Benching Bryce Young was a good choice. It was a tough choice, but it was a good choice. You're making that team a bit more competent. They have so many injuries on the defense, and at some point, you have a lot of young guys that just aren't very good football players or weren't highly drafted on a pedigree, and they can play with as much heart as they can. You're just trying to find one scrap of the top 10 or top 11 starters that matter. I think the Falcons are going to go ahead and kind of destroy in this one. And you look at rest of season, Kirk Cousins is on the waiver wire in a few places. I think Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback rest of the season outside of the Broncos in week 12 and maybe the Cowboys in week 9. You are starting Cousins if you have him on your lap probably every single week. And that was my whole point why I thought the Falcons would win the division. And I was betting that after week 3. The Chiefs and Steelers was always going to be hard. Their season after that was very easy. And the NFC South, we know, is very easy. So I think the Falcons would be great. I think Kirk Cousins will be totally fine.
It seems like Darnell Mooney is getting more and more love from the fantasy community. Has he worked his way into your circle of trust as someone you can start?
Absolutely. And above the Dontavian Wickses, Trey Tuckers of the world, Wan'Dale Robinsons of the world, even Jalen Tolberts. I'm talking about like guys that over the last 2 or 3 weeks, Jake Latarski and I have talked about on the waiver wire show ad nauseum. Mooney is a step above that, and maybe he isn't being valued that way in shallower leagues. In a 10-team league, is Mooney a PPR or receiver 3 or flex maybe? But in most of these 12-team leagues, slightly deeper ones, I think Mooney is well above that threshold. He needs to be rostered and probably started in most formats.
Yeah, big on Mooney, and I think this is a great spot for him. And then really on the flip side, I'm still riding with Chuba Hubbard.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Jonathan Brooks has not been activated to practice. So reminder, folks, I just want to keep reiterating, because he's not activated to practice, he cannot play. It's not one of those, well, I'll wait to see on Saturday. It's not possible for Brooks to play until he's been activated to practice. You do that earlier in the week. So no Brooks practice, no Brooks play. That's as simple as that.
There we go. So more Chuba time. We do have a super chat from our guy, Michael Johnson, former gold medal sprinter for the United States. I don't know if that's the same one or not. Nico Collins in his injured reserve spot. Would you drop Isaiah Pacheco to make that move? I would.
I have a editor in chief, I guess, Tim Schuler in my ear. Michael Johnson is still a gold medalist. He's not former. He didn't lose that, John, just because he doesn't currently have that. So you have to remove that. He's always going to be a gold medalist. Yes, very easily
edited.
I would very comfortably drop Isaiah Pacheco, especially with Nico as the IR spot for sure. Yep.
Yeah, with Pacheco, we don't know how long he's going to be out, and then we don't know what he's going to look like when he gets back. I think
the backfield. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't know what the Chiefs backfield will look like too. I wholeheartedly agree. Yep.
It's just, that's one where I'm going to take the page out of the Scott Pianowski book and fade injury optimism. Robert wants to know, another super chatter here. Darnell Mooney gets hurt every year. Should I pick up Ray McLeod or Alec Pierce to put in the flex? He's got Josh Downs, who is questionable. Well, I don't know. It feels like two separate conversations. I don't think I'm picking up.
Yes.
I don't think I'm picking up Ray McLeod on the condition that Darnell Mooney eventually gets hurt. I prefer Alec Pierce to McLeod if you're itching to make a move, but I think all things being equal, there Pierce over McLeod. I think McLeod's usage is kind of like the one sort of eyesore, or not the one eyesore. Everyone's mad about the Bijan Robinson stuff, but
sure. Yeah.
But McLeod is one of the more head scratching personnel moves there in Atlanta. So Pierce over McLeod for me. Let's hit Lions Cowboys here. Over under 52.5. So is this going to be
wrong.
the scoring fest that we think it's going to be?
I think so. I'm pretty convinced the Cowboys defense is just not very good. And post bye week, Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, I think will have more in their offensive tool bag than I'm handing off David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. To be clear, let's hand off to David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs will win them the football game. I think the Lions are going to very easily and comfortably beat the Cowboys this week, but they could do a little bit more, whether it be with Jameson Williams, whether it be Amon-Ra St. Brown. Could this be Sam Laporta's get right game or reemergence into the fantasy factor? Yeah, I'm actually really interested. I think the offense will be there. The question I'm really curious, will the Cowboys be able to keep pace with the Lions? And I think the Jalen Tolbert over Brandon Cooks, he's on injured reserve, Cooks is, but Tolbert now being more of a factor, I think by default, or maybe by talent, I'm not positive, gives the Cowboys enough of an advantage week to week where you're saying Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert, we can't run the ball, but even with the inability to run, we can pass with those three. So I like the Cowboys offense. I think Dak Prescott, you look at our strength of schedule tool on RotoWire, rotowire.com/try, you can see 48-hour access to the site. You can see a lot of different content, but you can find that strength of schedule tool. Prescott was our third ranked quarterback rest of season outside of, I think it's in 2 weeks. There's a difficult team. The Cowboys have 25 or later defenses the rest of the way. So I love the Cowboys offense. I think Dak Prescott, along with Kirk Cousins, be quarterbacks I want to have rest of season. I think Jalen Tolbert is going to look like a really good waiver wire pickup and a guy that could play pretty confidently right away.
I do too. Big Tolbert guy. It's been good to see him kind of work his way in. And I was not a big Brandon Cooks guy this draft season. I much preferred grabbing Tolbert a little bit later, and luckily that's starting to pan out. Sunday Night Football, we've got the Bengals and the Giants. Bengals need this one. The Giants, kind of rose up last week.
Sure.
and ruined whoever was left in Survivor for the most part. The Bengals, they can't stop anyone on defense. Does that kind of give some juice to Daniel Jones in this offense? Although it is worth noting that Malik Neighbors still in the same stage of concussion protocol that he was yesterday, which apparently is not a good sign.
Yeah, the way I understand that, and I've had a few concussions over the years, and I also am not an NFL player, but the way I understand the concussion protocol is that you can be in that same stage today and you can change tomorrow, or more importantly for this, you can be in that same stage Friday and change Saturday, so that the Giants have effectively 2 days still for Malik Neighbors to be out there matters. Now, I thought that was ridiculous. We're talking about last Thursday's game against the Cowboys. He was hit in the third quarter and groggy and was able to play. Everyone wants to throw their hands about Josh Allen getting KO'd in the loss against the Texans last Sunday, and rightfully so. Like, Josh Allen shouldn't have been on the football field. Malik Neighbors should not have been playing. And then he suffered, I thought, a second concussion or something to that effect later in the fourth quarter. And that was when he finally got taken out. So I'm not surprised that this is still lingering. But the way I understand the concussion protocol, the Giants effectively have 2 days to see his stats change somewhat, and that it can change. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do some sort of treatment and it'll be better. Like, it's you can see that happen. So I'm not concerned yet. But I never, ever would have guessed Week 6, Bengals Giants would have been a game I was looking forward to seeing, that I'd like map out my Sunday night for. I was sooner pissed at the NFL for it's a New York bias once again, like this crappy Daniel Jones team. Why do we have to go ahead and watch it? This should be fun. And it's in part because the Bengals defense is awful. It seems inexplicable. I guess DJ Reader is far more important than I would have assumed. How he has an impact on the secondary, looking like my Wisconsin Badgers, I don't know, but it's bad in Cincinnati's defense. And I think Daniel Jones, I share both you and Mario's pessimism for him. I think Daniel Jones can dice this team apart so long as he's healthy and staying in the pocket. It's actually, if Daniel Jones is trying to run around and move things and throwing out a schedule, that I get a bit concerned. But I think the Bengals, they've proven they're going to allow plenty of scheduled throws. They've been bad all year. I don't know what's supposed to change. I think the Giants, if not cover, could win this one. And I would definitely be playing Wan'Dale Robinson, even if Malik Neighbors is out there.
And then I think on the Bengals side, the offense is really, really not the problem. Like, if they had a couple more wins, we'd be talking about how explosive this offense is. But the defense has just been so bad. They lose to Washington, they lose to Baltimore, both of those games shootouts. So it's more like what's wrong with the Bengals? What's wrong with the Bengals defense? But Jamar Chase has very much gotten himself on track. I think T. Higgins week over week is going to start to get a little bit more comfortable. And I like the 1-2 punch of Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I think Burrow's playing at a high level. So I think that, it's with good reason that this game has an over-under close to 50. I think we're actually, like you said, you look ahead in August, you're not excited for this game, but suddenly I think that there is some legit intrigue there. Let's round it out. The Monday Nighter, Jets, Bills. What do you got?
Well, I talked about earlier. I don't think you make the move to fire Robert Saleh unless you're worried about losing the locker room. It's different situations, different players. But the Panthers don't bench Bryce Young, their number 1 overall pick that they traded for just a year ago, unless they were literally concerned that the team would be gone. Like effectively the locker room leadership, whatever else would be gone. So the Aaron Rodgers, did he do it? Did he keep Nathaniel Hackett around? Oh, now Nathaniel Hackett's been replaced as offensive coordinator. I don't really care about that stuff. It's not just a Packer fan. I'm not really trying to defend Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think it matters for this conversation. I think the Jets are going to win this game. I think they're going to look better than they have. Will that mean rest of season they look better? I don't know. How do they look better? If I'm doing things, I'm targeting Garrett Wilson more where he's effective in the intermediate level. The banged up sector for the Bills, but also like the Matt Milano injuries. It feels like they're ripe to be targeted in the middle. I think on the broadcast a couple weeks ago, it was either Monday, it was Monday or Sunday game, I'm not sure, but like Troy Aikman or one of the Mike Tirico, whatever, Chris Collinsworth, I'm rattling off different guys, were like, man, the Bills really just stink in the middle of the field. It's like, well, wait, you can't just have a defense be bad in the middle of the field. Like that's too big of a space to just be bad, but they happen. I mean, they can be targeted pretty easily. You saw Stephon Diggs and the Texans do that as well too. Last week, I think Garrett Wilson becomes an impactful player because they're doing things correctly offensively. And there's just a dead cat bounce where you make this move to fire Robert Saleh to change the things that were easy. Like just start doing easier things. And then we're going to just have an outcome that works our way this week. So I'm assuming Garrett Wilson gets more of a factor. Maybe Allen Lazard, not so much because you just want to get your best players the ball. It's not Allen Lazard, but I could be wrong. It's an Aaron Rodgers led team. It seems like an Aaron Rodgers coach team. Things can go haywire very quickly in that scenario.
What do you think about Breece Hall? Right now he's obviously been one of the bigger disappointments in the non-injury side from the first rounders this year. Do you think that this change within the team, within the coaching, helps Hall's case, or is this offensive line just bad enough to where it's hard to view this getting a ton better?
It's not great analysis, but this is another one of those scenarios where I just assume you're going to do the easier thing. Let's get our best players the ball involved more in ways in which we can. Let's play it out a couple of years ago. Everyone's clamoring for Tony Pollard to get more work over Ezekiel Elliott. Then Zeke gets hurt. Tony Pollard doesn't do crazy things. It's because the offense was functioning effectively when Zeke was taking some of those harder carries. You had Tony Pollard have the more octane, more explosive ones. If your offense can just put Breece Hall in spots to be more successful and not Braylon Allen, the Jets are going to win more games. Like I'm lower on Braylon Allen. He has hurt my college team a little bit more. There's probably some negative vibes that I have with Braylon Allen because of that, but Braylon Allen's a fine player. Breece Hall is one of the best running backs in the league. I don't think this is a shocking revelation. The Falcons should do the same thing with Bijan Robinson. I get really annoyed when coaches and schemes aren't just using the best players to do things that they're really good at, but this seems to be a prevailing issue overall in the NFL. Yes, I think at least for this week, especially the vulnerabilities the Bills have, it seems like in the middle of the field, Breece Hall should be just fine. I'm not benching him yet. I'd be happy to go and trade for him if somebody's selling him low, but you're probably not selling Breece Hall very low, and you're probably hoping that he performs well. I think this sort of change, at least for this week, will make Breece Hall, where you drafted him, feel like the right call.
I'm hoping so. I mean, it does look like the interior of that Bills defensive line a little bit beat up, and obviously it's been a huge issue all year with no Matt Milano with that biceps injury. So, the Bills come out of the gate hot, but they've played a couple of credible teams in the last 2 weeks and come back to earth a little bit. So this sets up as a pretty fascinating game. Really long injury reports for both teams here, so something to keep an eye on as we get into the weekend and as everybody sets their lineups. But that's going to do it for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Joe, thank you very much for jumping in for Mario. And big thanks to our sponsors over at Underdog, over at Circa, and over at Vivid Seats. For Joe Bartle, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.